Hi, I'm Rosie Snow. I'm the Director of Christian Discipleship at Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church, a progressive Christian congregation in Charlottesville, Virginia. This is the fourth video in my series, Jesus Take the Phone, which is about how churches and Christian communities can respond to the all-consuming nature of screen-based technology and the way that it's disrupting our ability to pay deep attention, and especially to pay attention to God, where God shows up in our world. In an earlier video, I talked about how in many ways the Bible chronicles the story of a people learning to give their attention to God. The Bible is also a story that chronicles the relationship between people and a piece of land, the land generally, and then specifically the land Israel. The Bible tells a story of an initial creation where there is much closeness between people and the land. But over time, a separation occurs between people and the land, where they first are expelled from the Garden of Eden. It becomes more difficult to farm, to draw forth abundance from the creation, and there being inherent spiritual problems that arise as people become more and more separated from the land. In Genesis, we are given a look into this incredibly abundant and gorgeous creation. And we are told that humans are to have a very close relationship with the earth, a close relationship to look over it, to maintain the balance, and to cultivate it. And this requires close attention, a kind of attention that we just do not pay nature anymore. Humans' relationship with the land reflects their relationship with God. Over and over, through the prophets, through the history, you see natural disasters occurring side by side with spiritual disasters. When the people rebel against God, there are consequences, not only for humans, but for the earth. And when redemption comes, it's always for people and the earth. You get amazing imagery of springs gushing forth water, of the renewal of the land, of the animals and the creatures of the earth experiencing an abundance that comes along with the abundance for humans, which is a reflection of a closer relationship with God. Now we know that Jesus's redemption of the world includes the earth. One belief that many Christians have come to, which I don't think is what the Bible is saying, is that there's just a complete annihilation and destruction of this earth, that it's completely burnt to a crisp, and then there's a new earth that is completely unrelated. So the idea is we don't really need to worry about how we treat this earth. But that goes against this very consistent theme in the Bible of whenever there is a desolation that occurs, there is always a thread that continues, and then renewal comes from that thread. Whether we're talking about the stump, the tree that's cut down, and then a shoot comes out of it, and there's a continuation from that. We see that in Romans 2, where the earth is portrayed as alongside a human being groaning to be free of its bondage to decay. So it's more of a dramatic transformation that we're talking about, not a complete annihilation and then something completely new. Because in the Bible, when we talk about God doing something new or God making something new, it's built off of what came before. Currently, for the most part, us humans, and certainly many of us Christians, really have a reverse relationship of what is asked of us in Genesis, where we are not cultivating the earth. No, tar sands are not cultivation Fracking is not cultivation, it's exploitation. Because cultivation of the earth involves working with the earth to produce abundance in a way that maintains balance and that works with nature's ability to renew and regenerate itself and to continue to create abundance for humans and also all creatures. That's not what we're doing. And there's no closeness with the earth anymore. We're not paying attention to it. Most of us wouldn't be able to name the trees that are growing around us, or, the insects, the animals that live alongside us. Most of us couldn't even say what phase of the moon it is right now. These are the sorts of things that humans have paid attention to for thousands and thousands of years. And we find ourselves in a place now where we're very oblivious. But to pay attention to nature is to pay attention to God. And that's not to say that God is nature. That's pantheism, the idea that all of God is expressed in nature. You might say that it's more of a panentheism, which is the idea that God is in all of nature and also beyond nature, which is something you see come up more in like Eastern Orthodox Christianity, not so much Western. And you can certainly say that God is immanent in nature, that God is not just a distant, eminent being, but is immanent in nature and reveals God's self in nature to us and is present in nature. And that this is one of the most beautiful ways and reliable ways that we can connect to God. You could also think of it like when you're in a museum, if you are interested in seeing a Monet or artwork by a specific artist, you're not staring at a picture of the artist, him or herself. You go and look at their art, and that's how you get to know the soul of that artist and what they're trying to express. It's similar with God as the creator of this gorgeous world that we live in. We get to know God by peering into and connecting with God's artwork. Nature is also a powerful way for us to wrest our attention away from our screens and instead focus it back on God. It may be the most powerful way for some people. There are people who have said that when they go out into nature, that for them is going to church, that for them is a form of worship. And it may seem obvious to say, go out into nature and your ability to pay attention will deepen, or that being out in nature is healthy. I mean, there are doctors who actually write prescriptions for their patients to just go out into nature. We know that along with other spiritual practices of attentional faithfulness that I've talked about, going out into nature will change your brain. It will change your heart rate. It will change your experience of life. But even knowing that in some sort of nominal way, few of us are actually living into that and taking advantage of the beauty that surrounds us. Given the ecological and climate crises that we are in, which are rapidly progressing, everyone, and certainly Christians, should be reestablishing a closeness with nature and stepping back into the roles that were established for us in Genesis. And that starts with paying attention to nature. We're not all going to necessarily leap into regenerative agriculture project right away, but the first step is going out, getting to know, what watershed you live in, getting to know the names of the plants and the animals that live around you. As you do that, a falling in love with the earth, which is also devotion to God, comes next. And it's absolutely not something we're going to do just because it is the right thing to do and that there's urgency there and we must come into right relationship with the earth. It's also a powerful and wonderful way for us to turn our attention back to God and for God to transform and change us into kinder, happier, and healthier human beings. The more we learn about the patterns of the earth and the way that plants work and different creatures and what they do, the more we learn how the earth is a self-organizing system, the more we see the potential there for renewal and regeneration and healing. We know there are mushrooms that take chemical pollution out of the soil. We know that there are oceanic creatures like oysters that do the same thing in the ocean. We know that we can plant coral. We know that there's mycelium in the ground that connects trees and that they pass nutrients back and forth. There's so much that we're learning about the planet and certain forms of agriculture, like regenerative agriculture, that there are options available to us to stop the harm and instead immediately begin to move into a era of deep healing for the planet and ourselves. And that is what God wants for us. So when we think about how churches and congregations can help their communities begin practices of attentional faithfulness, nature really should be involved with that, especially as the pandemic continues and even as vaccines become adopted. There will probably be a period of time where it just is safer to meet outside. This is one silver lining to this horrible situation that we can respond to. We have a church garden on our campus that is a wonderful resource as far as being able to move activities outdoors and bring people's attention into nature and onto God simultaneously. But there are many ways that churches can integrate time outdoors with their existing ministries. You can start a hiking group. You can just bring activities outside to any sort of outdoor space you have. You can take some field trips to permaculture farms or gardens or any place that seems to inspire a sense of balance where people have already started to come into right relationship with the earth. There's a website called the Center for Spirituality and Nature. Well, it's not just a website. They have a website. And they have tons and tons of resources for spiritual practice in nature. And I recommend checking that out. One last thing I'll say, and I've mentioned this in several other videos, is we know that the spiritual fuel for Jesus's teaching, the way that he centered himself, the way that he connected to God and got away from the craziness in order to sustain his ministry, was to go into nature, to pay attention to it. And that paying attention to it was very closely related to his relationship with God. If we want to become more like Jesus, if we want to follow Jesus, it follows that spending time in nature, cultivating a sense of attention to it, practicing attentional faithfulness in nature is going to be incredibly important to our spiritual development as well. The next and last video in this series is attentional faithfulness and witness, about how responding to the suffering and disharmony that exists in our world, obviously today, is also another way to train our attention back on God, to give our attention to God and rebalance our relationship with screen-based technology. Again, I'm Rosie Snow, and Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church is a sanctuary church. It is a reconciling United Methodist church. You can check out our ministries on our website and fill out the form below if you want to connect. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful week.
Don't let anybody tell you zombies aren't real. Walk down any street and tell me what you feel.